Ready.
Good afternoon, Pam Seidel from City News. Thank you for holding the news conference. I'd like to ask you about the condo market, particularly in Toronto. How concerned are you about it? And if you could just, as a follow-up, explain how much of an impact it could have on the economy as a whole, or the housing market as a whole.
Well, we watch the housing market pretty carefully on a regular basis, an important indicator of how households are doing and what sorts of debts they are taking on. We do get data on the individual markets, which are of interest, but we're really looking at the macro picture and what it means for Canada and therefore for monetary policy. So I'd say it's, as you pose the question, it's of interest to us, but it's not some deciding factor in the way you may be thinking. Sorry.
Behind you.
Let me just,
Okay.
I mean, concerns is, we've highlighted in our financial stability report the risk that certain markets could become overheated. However, at this stage, I'm not seeing evidence that we are overheating. So that's why I'm saying I don't consider it a concern, but it's a risk that we monitor carefully.
Bob Fisher, CBC News. Recent data shows a recovery in the U.S. economy. Is this enough of a recovery to give the Canadian export sector the news that they've been waiting for, hoping for?
Well, I think it's a good beginning. We know the U.S. economy continues to be, if you like, to be adjusting. It is not in a full-fledged self-sustained recovery, but it's doing much better. And that's inevitably positive for Canadian exporters, especially. The fact is that the U.S. economy is growing faster in the private sector than it would appear with the numbers, because there's still a significant fiscal drag that slows down the big numbers. And those private demands are more important, actually, to Canadian exporters than, say, the fiscal impact in the U.S. So that is, on balance, good news. It's something we're monitoring. It's still a bit early for us to be able to seal that deal. But we're seeing encouraging signs in things related to the housing sector, for sure. We're seeing some good signs in the auto sector. So things are starting to go our way.
Ewan Rocha with Reuters. The growth of household debt, which was a big concern for your predecessor, appears to be stabilizing, and inflation is well below target. As you look ahead to your first rate decision in July, does that lessen the need for the bank to maintain its tightening bias?
Well, I won't comment on the policy formulation matters at this stage. As I indicated in my speech, we go through a pretty comprehensive process. It takes about 4 to 5 weeks. It's just beginning now, leading up to the mid-July monetary policy report and the accompanying announcement. So what that process does is it ensures that we take account of absolutely everything that's new since our last decision, appropriately weighted, appropriately debated, discussed, and so please bear with me as we go through that process. Thank you.
Greg Quinn, Bloomberg News.
Hi, Greg.
Good afternoon. Your interest rate is already at 1%. You made a lot of comments about the need to boost business investment and confidence. But what else can the Bank of Canada do at this point with such a low interest rate to generate that growth and investment?
Well, as I was saying in my speech, I think it's a matter of letting Mother Nature do her usual job. That we have already set the table. Interest rates are low. There's plenty of stimulus in the system. But I think that what I'm picking up from my conversations is the word uncertainty or unconfidence, if you like, or lack of confidence is what comes up. And so what we're looking to is to ensure that what we've seen Canadian companies looking for opportunities in emerging markets, so they have diversified their trade. Those markets are growing reasonably well, in fact, pretty well as expected. And the missing link has been the U.S. economy, and that link is coming in. Still weakness in Europe, of course, but with that combination, we think that we will see the kind of foreign demand that we need to cross the line into a more confident mindset. And indeed, in order to fulfill the orders that are coming, I think companies will need to then begin to invest in some increase in capacity. And the more exciting part, even so, for me, would be to see the pickup in the rate at which new companies are formed. Because those companies, they create disproportionately the job opportunities, especially for young people, et cetera. So that's a very positive thing when that dynamic reemerges. And as I said, we're kind of watching that. It may have already begun. The data are a little behind us, but I think I'm optimistic that the situation is ready.
Hi, David George Kosh, The Wall Street Journal. Pleasure to meet you. There has been some recent economic data that appears to possibly, in terms of some economists' view, to be an aberration. In terms of the latest employment figures that were the sharpest gain in nearly a decade, as well as manufacturing numbers, which were the lowest since 2009. So, in your view, I mean, are we seeing an aberration here in economic data here in Canada in recent times? Or what is what are these numbers telling us?
Well, first of all, we would never focus all of our attention on a single data point. For us, it's a question of how is that trend shifting through time. And so our sense of the numbers is that they are coming together more or less as we described in the last monetary policy report in April. So people are reasonably comfortable that it is like that. The aberrations, you have some special stories around them, so you're able to say, oh, I understand why at least part of that aberration is there. So these things, of course, are heavily interpreted, but inevitably. So that's why it's important that we go through the process I mentioned before, leading up to the next announcement. In that process, all such things then are filtered, engaged, and debated, and all that uncertainty, we try to minimize it all we can. And so that process is just beginning, and it's for me, it's the first time that I've been engaged in that process. So it's a very interesting process as it unfolds. So I have to leave it at that for today. Those data points, some of them were, gee whiz and in two directions, no question about it. But then after you give it some more consideration, you realize, well, it hasn't really changed the trend or the underlying story.
At the back.
Greg Bonnell, BNN. In your speech today, you talk about businesses finding the confidence. You say their balance sheets are strong, the money is there for investment. Your predecessor called that dead money. You're taking a different approach. Was dead money the wrong term, and why the different approach?
Well, I think even my predecessor decided that dead money wasn't quite the term he was looking for at the time. But I think that the better characterization is that we have healthy balance sheets, and we need that if we are to get the kind of follow-through that we expect to see in this expansion. As in effect, as the household sector has carried most of the burden of recovery to this point, and is at a stage where they're inevitably going to moderate and maybe kind of continue to contribute, however, not be the source of a major spurt of growth. And so the companies that I talk to are feeling comfortable, are watching their orders, they're watching their foreign customers, they're getting into new markets, so they are growing, but they're being understandably cautious, given what we've been through, to translate that into a commitment to increase the capacity to produce. That virtuous cycle of increased demand and increased capacity is taking a little longer to develop, and I think it is just because there are so many sources of uncertainty internationally. It just takes, if you like, more analysis, more time to convince yourself that it's got the staying power that you need to make a significant investment in your company. And it's even more the case if you're contemplating and creating a company out of thin air. So those kinds of investment decisions are much bigger than the typical textbook cycle where we say, oh, we cut back on production because there's a recession, and 6, 9, 12 months later we put it back. We've been through a lot more this time. Some of that capacity is simply gone. So you can't just put it back. It requires a bigger decision to get back. And so it's taking longer, and I think it's completely understandable, hence my conclusion, which is we need to be more patient.
At the back again. Alexandra Gunn with Sun News Network. Mark Carney dismissed the notion that the success of the energy sector in Alberta was impacting the manufacturing sector. Do you believe that Canada suffers from Dutch disease?
No, I don't. In fact, the fact that some of the things that we produce are today worth so much more to the rest of the world than they were in the previous, I say, 10 years ago, is very good for Canada in general. That's a lot more foreign money coming in to buy those things. And of course, consequently is very positive for those who supply those sectors here in Canada. And as the governor pointed out before, that's a lot of manufacturers all across the country making equipment, pipe, steel, drilling, and all those things that are connected are scattered across the entire country. So that's, as we call in the jargon, a positive terms of trade shock, and that's an unambiguously good thing. Does it give rise to some adjustments? And the answer is yes. But those adjustments are so much easier when it's a positive development than they would be if it were a negative one. But as a positive one, you've got more income in Canada and more ability to attract the labor you need in the various places. So I'm not trying to dismiss the fact that there are adjustments after such a shock, because they're important and they can be difficult for some companies and great for others. But the adjustments happen more easily in the environment we just described.
At the back again.
Hi, I'm Jason Leung from Omni TV. In your speech, you mentioned that the inflation target is sacrosanct to you, and it's also the symmetrical. Would there any flexibility in your future inflation target? I mean, any flexibility in your...
Any flex?
Yeah.
Well, there's no flexibility in the target itself. But what we talk about is there is flexibility in the horizon at which we ensure we stay on it. So when there is a shock, such as the one we had, during the 2008-2009 recession, that's inevitably going to take inflation lower than we thought it would otherwise be. And we're saying that the process of getting it back to target can take a little longer or be more quick, depending on the other circumstances that we face. And that because we've been, on average, 2% for a very long time, the general public treats that with a great deal of respect. The expectations are well anchored by the policy, and so they don't insist that we get inflation back to target immediately and still believe the 2% target. And frankly, that was always, it's not a new development. I was at the bank back when we first proposed inflation targets, and when we did that, we concluded immediately that it would be impossible to keep inflation exactly on target all the time, that we needed that margin to maneuver just to prevent spillovers of major volatility to the rest of the economy. So it was always thus that there would be 6 to 8 quarters during which you would work to get the inflation back onto target. And so today, if it took 6 quarters and next time it took 8 quarters, that would be just fine. That's what we mean by flexible. But no flexibility about the framework itself. That's reviewed on a continuous basis, was renegotiated, et cetera, with the government, and so we have the mandate to pursue that.
À droite.
Monsieur Poloz, Sébastien Saint-François, Radio-Canada.
Bonjour.
On va vous demander une réponse en français, s'il vous plaît. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez des commentaires de Paul Krugman qu'il a émis à Toronto en fin de semaine sur les risques pour le Canada d'un big deal leveraging shock?
Bien, c'est certain qu'avec une politique de taux d'intérêt très bas durant longtemps, c'est un produit, c'est le leverage, c'est certain. Et ce qu'on sait, c'est que les risques de leverage sont plus élevés si c'est plus longtemps. Mais en même temps, les risques globaux sont beaucoup plus importants. On a introduit des taux d'intérêt très bas parce qu'il y avait des autres risques qui étaient plus importants à cette époque. Alors, c'est une question très dynamique. C'est certain qu'on préfère qu'éventuellement, nous verrons un retour vers le normal, et ça serait un taux d'intérêt plus élevé. Et dans notre prévision, ça c'est exactement ce qu'on voit. c'est que le taux d'inflation va retourner vers son cible et éventuellement, à un certain point, que les taux d'intérêt vont monter. Alors, les risques sont là, on les accepte parce que les autres risques sont sur l'autre côté.
Qu'est-ce que vous avez pensé quand vous avez vu ces commentaires-là qu'il a émis en fin de semaine? What was your reaction? Qu'est-ce que ça vous a fait penser?
Ben, je l'ai lu et c'est tout. C'était intéressant. J'ai beaucoup de respect pour M. Krugman. Je vois les analyses chaque jour et ils ne sont pas toujours quelque chose avec quoi je suis d'accord, mais en même temps, il y a des autres. Il y a toujours quelque chose d'intéressant dedans.
On the right.
Jordan Maxwell here of your Mississauga Biz. You said in your speech here that standard microeconomic models can only go so far in capturing today's economy.
Yes.
So other than expansion into foreign markets and growing Canadian confidence here, what are your thoughts on what else it's going to take to have Canadians experience significant growth here?
Yes. Well, what I said was that macroeconomic models, I think you might have said micro, but macroeconomic models, as we understand them, are basically built on average experience. And that average experience gives us parameters, and it gives us a sense of comfort that if this happens, then that will happen. So you might have a model that says, oh, if there's a recession, you cut interest rates, and after 6 or 8 quarters, you go back, for example. But what I was saying is that in the experience we've had, it's been unlike any other. That's a cycle which is bigger and much longer than anything the models were equipped to deal with. And in the process, we saw that destruction element that I talked about. And so the recovery from where we went must look different. It's not just a typical one where one company cuts production and then 6 or 9 months later puts production back. If the company has reduced size or, in fact, has disappeared, it can't do what the model says it will do. So what we need to do, I think, is to add an additional element of patience to our expectations. We know that the laws of Mother Nature, or the laws of economics, are very close, if you like, to the laws of Mother Nature. If they're allowed to work, and that the demand in foreign countries continues to build as we expect, then almost inevitably companies will follow that positive dynamic. If your question is there something else that we can do at this stage, I would say, well, no. At this stage, we are already have a great deal of monetary stimulus in the system, and we can see that it's working. And I think we need to be patient and allow those confidence effects to work themselves out.
So we only have a few minutes left. We'll take 2 more questions. On the right.
Sean Jeffords, Toronto Sun. Governor, in your speech, you gave some credit to the average Canadian consumer, who you mentioned wasn't afraid to spend and borrow during the recession, and that helped pull us through. I'm wondering if you can expand on the role of that Canadian consumer. Today, you joked, go out and go to restaurants. I'm wondering if there's more that Canadians should do, or does that burden now shift to business to spend?
Well, essentially, that's right. I mean, that was not a call to arms for Canadian consumers. It's just that the person who asked me the question happens to be a restaurateur. And you folks may have missed that. She has a cooking show and so on. So it was kind of an inside joke, and I guess 800 people, some of the 800 people would have gotten it. But anyway, so thanks for allowing me to clear that up. So it was quite a jest. And I mean, I don't really think there is a call to arms for consumers. Consumers have done a great deal to fill in, if you like, the post-bubble crater which emerged after this recession. And so we built a lot of houses, and we bought a lot of cars, and we spent, and we took on debt in order to do it. Interest rates were nice and low, so it all worked out. And my sense is that consumers have pretty well finished what they're likely to do, and what they're more likely to do over the next coming couple of years is allow their incomes to pay off some of their debts and just kind of keep things rolling there. And so they continue to contribute to GDP growth, but they become more neutral in the picture of what's changing. So what will change is that the foreign demand that we're watching is reaching that critical mass point. That takes two forms. That is that through this difficult time, exporters have done a very good job of diversifying away from just relying on the U.S. economy as a foreign customer. And so they're connecting, to much higher growth rates there. And I've seen that firsthand. Okay, so the EDC's policies, their programs are intended to facilitate exactly that. So great data on that suggesting that is occurring. And now what happens is the U.S. economy picks up speed at just the right time. And so what's going to happen is you get that full plate of stronger growth. So yes, essentially we're looking for a rotation of demand from the household sector to exporting, and what will follow from that is business, because they need to see that demand in order for that to occur and have the confidence that it's for real and will last. I think that's the important element that to now has been a little vague, or not totally reassuring for many companies. And once you have that happening and you have good employment effects, which we are seeing, I'm very encouraged by that, then you're going to see the kind of atmosphere where you'll get net creation of new small companies who actually generate the lion's share of new jobs. So that's the whole thing. That's all that and everything we see suggests that that's exactly what we should see in the numbers as they come out. We have to stay tuned for it.
Last question over here.
Hello, Tavia Grant from the Globe and Mail. There's been a lot of chatter about the Federal Reserve today. I'm wondering, as the Fed eventually scales back its bond and asset buying program, could you spell out the impact of that both on the Canadian economy and particularly on the Canadian dollar, what you see happening?
Well, let's begin by saying that we are in uncharted territory. So we as in many things, when I said that the models aren't really doing the job, that's the truth. And so we're in a larger zone of uncertainty than we're used to. And so it's why I put so much emphasis on talking to Canadian companies to understand firsthand what actually they are seeing and what they're concerned about. So setting that aside, I understand that there was the Fed announced today that everything's unchanged. And so that's something we'll look for in the future. But the way I would see this unfolding is as the U.S. economy gathers its strength, which we can see on its way, at a certain point, the Fed will be saying, well, we've got our job nearly done, right? So their confidence will be up there along with the business confidence that I've been talking about. And so this business of withdrawal is new for us, but I think that it's something that will follow, if you like, what I was referring to before, is some of the laws of nature. That when if you've got a fire hose and the liquidity is going out, at a certain point you can start to peel it back, and the fire hose is lessening, but you're still putting the liquidity out there. And at a certain point, then you say, "Oh, the job's clearly done," and then you can actually begin to unwind all those big balance sheet effects. But you do it in an atmosphere of confidence that the economy is strong, and so I have no idea at this stage, at what point will the Fed see all of that in their picture. That's something for them to address, and for here in Canada, we will watch it with pleasure, because it'll mean that our major trading partner is getting stronger and stronger, and we will feel those positive effects. And that's the part that will matter most to us, that the economy is gathering extra momentum from all directions. And so we'll work through that as it happens. Our forecast says it is happening, so stay tuned.
Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, everybody.
Can you pronounce your name for us? I've heard about 60 times today.
It's 5 letters, and it's amazing, eh? Poloz.
Poloz.
That's right. Thank you.